Ready? Okay. I'm Dawn, Waterloo Listens Information Director. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. I hope that whatever you learned tonight, valuable information that you'll take away and that you'll, spread the knowledge and spread the inspiration that we have here tonight. Um, so as you know, Waterloo Listens focuses on listening to communities and experiences outside of our own. Um, our guest speaker tonight is Marleen Menendez Suarez, a local attorney who's been providing pro bono services in the area to people whose immigration and citizenship status are uncertain under the current administration. She's here tonight to tell us about what she's seen, offer insights on the struggles her clients face, and encourage us to action that can help others. Welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I love to spread the word about what is going on right now that everybody's talking about in the news so much. And I'm on the lines. Said in the introduction, I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney for 18 years. I was a later in life attorney. I didn't become in my 40s. Before that, I was a stockbroker. And I got tired of that. That's about all I'm going to say about that business. But you haven't seen a mean business until you've been in the stock brokerage industry. It's a pretty dirty business. And I went back to school because I had not finished my undergrad degree. And my husband said, you know what you need to do? You need to go back to school and finish your undergrad degree. I'm like, yeah, great. And I decided, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do something that interests me. So I went back to school and got a degree in genetic engineering because I wasn't dumb enough. So after I got done with that, I really thought I was going to go on and get a PhD, like in molecular biology or cell biology or something. But I realized that I wasn't going to be happy in a lab all day. And at my age, and also the fact that I got a genetic engineering degree by the skin of my teeth because it wasn't easy. I just knew that these youngsters that were in class with me were so much smarter and so much better suited for that, for doing research, scientific research and that. So it was my son's senior year in high school, and I decided, I'm going to take off his senior year. A lot of stuff going on senior year. And think about this for a while. My husband kept saying, I think you'd be a good lawyer. So just to shut up, I took the LSAT and I forgot about it. And then when I remembered to go look up the score, it was like April, and it was really past the admittance time to apply to law school. But I looked at it and I said, I think I might be going to law school. I applied and got in at both WashU and St. Louis U. I chose St. Louis U for a variety of reasons. I loved it there. Learned a lot, but I guess it was about September 15th of that first semester when I sat there thinking, this isn't the best way to live out a midlife crisis, but it was fun. I had a good time, and I thought I was going to become a patent lawyer. And everything is a journey. I went to lunch to listen to a patent lawyer. They would bring lawyers in from different areas and speak to us. And so this patent lawyer came in, and I fell asleep during his thing. And I said, this isn't going to work. I should have been a research scientist. And so I thought, what the heck am I going to do? So I wound up going to a speech for criminal defense. And I was one of the top lawyers at the St. Louis or at the Missouri State Public Defender's Office. And a year later, I was working on a death penalty case in the Missouri State Public Defender's Office. And we won. He got life in prison, which is a win in the death penalty world. And it was probably the most gratifying experience of my life, besides the normal stuff, motherhood, wedding, all that stuff. But this was amazing. And so I became a criminal defense lawyer. I just opened up my own practice. And it just evolved. And now what I do is mostly criminal defense. I do some family, but I'm so busy right now, I haven't been taking family cases. And because my heritage is Hispanic and my husband's is also, and we both grew up in this little town that is basically 85% Latino and Hispanic, I started getting a lot of those people as my clients, and I learned about the wild world of immigration. And there's another little specialty under, that criminal defense lawyers and immigration, the people who do some immigration kind of get into, and it's called crimigation. So I carved out a little niche in that even before this whole immigration stuff started. And it was what you do is I basically consult with other lawyers or sometimes my own clients who have criminal problems, but are also immigrants. They're not citizens. They may be documented, they may not be documented. And my job is to try to find a way to not screw up their immigration status too much. And as you can imagine, that's gotten harder and harder and harder to do. Because, not so much because the laws have changed, but because the people have changed. The people of the United States have changed. And it has become a much less accepting atmosphere for people who are immigrants to this country. So I moved my practice to Fairmont City, where, as I said, I grew up, and I started doing immigration, but you haven't done anything horrible until you've done immigration law. And I'll get into why that is. And that's why so few lawyers do it. It's very hard these days to find an immigration lawyer. And either they're fantastic lawyers in immigration law. So if you know anybody looking for an immigration lawyer, don't hire one until you talk to me. I'm not kidding, because a lot of immigration lawyers have figured out that this is a very vulnerable population, and I'm ashamed to say that they take advantage of it. And because of the nature of the immigration system, it's easy to do because it moves at a snail's pace. It can take years to get somebody through it. So I wanted to kind of go over a little bit about the immigration system so that you understand more about how this works and how it's just such a challenge for people to do. If there's one thing I hate more than anything, is when somebody looks at me and says, well, my grandparents came the right way. Oh, yeah. Sure, they did. Yeah, they did. Like my grandparents and my husband's grandparents, they got off in Ellis Island. His mother's parents came from Mexico. His father's from Spain. My father's parents came from Spain. My mother's from Poland. So most of them came through Ellis Island. They passed a cursory health exam, and they gave them the name of who they were going to go to. Who was their contact in the United States? Nobody checked it. Nobody cared. And just what the address was. And then they were sent all their way. That was the right way. That's how they did it back then. Your parents wouldn't have made it through. Your grandparents may not have made it through today. The immigration system law, the Immigration Act, wasn't even passed in the United States until 1952. So no, your parents, your grandparents who came in, they didn't have the challenges immigrants have now. And when you talk about somebody who, I'm going to use Mexico mostly because that's what most of my clients are from, is Mexico and Central America. When you represent somebody from Mexico who is living in a little village, they're not making any money, they're hard workers, they're good, decent people, family men and women, and they decide, let's go to the United States and let's see what we can do there. Let's make a life there. Let's better ourselves. Let's go get an education for our children. Do you know there is simply no way, no way for those people to come here legally? Did you realize that? Everybody says, well, why don't they just come legally? They can't. They can't. There is no path to legal immigration just because you want a better life. There's not a lottery. There's not a thing you can put your name in a hat and hopefully you'll be one of the lucky ones. There isn't. There just isn't. So the two ways you get in is on either an immigrant visa or a non-immigrant visa. So immigrant visas, and I always forget all this because I don't actually do immigration anymore because it's just horrible and I like my sanity. But immigrant visas are things like fiance visas, family-based visas. And I'll get a little bit more into that so that you really understand that. Let me tell you some of the other ways you can get in. Family-based visas, visas for spouses, those are unlimited. And there's limited family visas. And then there's a few other ways you can come in. There's some employment-based visas, but there's only 140,000 available each year. And I want to think about that. Sounds like a lot. It's not. That needs to be time 10 at least. I'm not kidding. Our country can handle it. And those people who come in have to be sponsored by an employer who guarantees that they have a job for them and that they cannot find that type of work from somebody in the United States. So what you wind up getting is a lot of your high-tech people try to use these visas, and their employers are the ones who do it. They don't apply for the visa. Their employer has to do it. And sometimes it takes years for them to get in. And I just talked to an immigration lawyer who told me what he's doing is, I thought this was pretty clever. He's going to get caught eventually. They're going to catch on to it. It's legal. But he's having these big companies establish an office in, it's a client, sorry, establish an office in Canada. Send the person to work in Canada. Let them work there a few years, then transfer them here. And they can come in on a work transfer on a temporary visa, and then you can change them over to an employment visa when one opens up, as soon as that company gets one in the lottery. So then there's a lot of requirements for this. It's very, very hard. Your employer has to do it for you. And then there's a couple of others, and I'm going to save my favorite for last. Persons with advanced degrees and exceptional abilities, professionals and skilled workers. So that's where you get a lot of your really like neurosurgeons, very specialized doctors come in on that, and scientists. Special immigrants such as religious workers, retired employees from U.S. embassies. So if you worked in the U.S. embassy in Spain, you get a little preference to come here if you want to. But you have to have an employer sponsoring you. And then investors who invest at least $1 million and hire at least 10 US workers in a new commercial enterprise. So that's how Elon Musk got his citizenship. Oh, but how did Melania get hers? Wait a minute. That would be persons of extraordinary abilities. And since they don't really go into the extraordinary ability, I'm not going to go there. No. Okay, so then there's also some other visas that are available here and there. They're also very hard to get, and they're almost impossible to get now. That's a VAWA. So if you're married to a U.S. spouse and you need to divorce them, so now you can't get the spousal visa, you can't get the spousal citizenship or green card, you can get this, the VAWA, if you can prove that you've been abused by them. And I've done that once for somebody. It actually worked. A U visa is somebody for a victim of a very serious crime. I think when I'm talking about a serious crime, there were people in the World Trade Center who were able to get U visas just by being in the World Trade Center. So we're not talking about you got mugged. Okay. There's a T visa for victims of human trafficking, which has practically not been allowed during Trump's term. And then there's asylum seekers, and we're going to get into what asylum means and refugee status, because those are Refugee is different than an immigrant, and a lot of people confuse that. In fact, I'll go into that right now. Refugees are people who come here because it's too dangerous to live in their own country and they can't return. So we're talking about people like, in the past, it was Cubans, okay, Haitians, Sri Lanka was, they were letting people come from Sri Lanka, countries that really have bad situations going on, and I mean the worst of the worst. And so they will give refugee status to anybody from that country. And I forgot, the countries go on and off the list, but the big ones right now are Haitians. And I think there's a country in Africa that you can come here without a problem if you're from there. So you come here as a refugee, you're allowed to stay here. It's just that simple. But you don't initiate that. The United States initiates that, says we're going to give protections to all the Haitians. And then they can take it away, just like they did to the poor Cubans who all thought Trump was their their end all and be all. And then what did he do? He took away their refugee status. Some of them had already become citizens. Quite a few of them have, because that's been going on for a long time. But Cuba is still a communist country, which, it's bad there. Conditions are bad for people who live there. And if you can get to the United States, I think you deserve to stay here. But because that's what we're all about here in the United States, but they don't. Asylum seekers are people who are kind of like refugees, but they initiate it themselves. So you hear a lot about these asylum seekers. Some of them are gaming it, but there's a system in place to stop that. Okay, there is, when you come and you ask for asylum, there's a little process. And amazingly, this is called due process. It's a little thing in the Constitution that if you get a traffic ticket, you're allowed to have due process. But apparently, if your 14-year-old daughter has been gang raped by the gang that lives down the street and they're threatening to kill your husband and all your sons unless you send her over to be a prostitute, well, that you don't get due process for. Not in America, not anymore. You used to, but not anymore. And I happen to know a young man who works for a very prestigious law firm in Chicago, 13th largest law firm in the world. And it takes a whole lot to get a job there right out of law school. You have to be the best of the best. And that's my nephew. So I'm very proud of him. He just went down to Mexico. He speaks fluent Spanish, and he went there to help asylum seekers. And he was there for a week. And during that week, he was only able to help one because everything was so screwed up at the border. The little courts that they have set up to deal with asylum seekers, just judges don't show up, prosecutors don't show up. He worked with one man who had a really tragic story. He didn't tell me because he's still young and he protects all those, those ethics rules about you don't talk about your clients. Like, you'll get over that. But, but he was very, very, very upset when he came back. He knew in his mind, now he knows in his heart. He's seen it firsthand. He said there were literally thousands of asylum seekers piled up on the Mexican side of the border. And they weren't all Mexicans. Most of them come from Guatemala or Honduras. And then you do have some coming in. They make their way to Mexico through like places like Syria, Gaza. If they're really lucky, they'll get in through Gaza, come from Gaza, all places. But they come up through Mexico because it's the easiest for them to get. They don't have the money to buy an airline ticket or anything like that. So they have to get someplace cheap and walk up to the border and try to ask for asylum. And they do this most of the time without really any knowledge of the laws, without any knowledge of what they're doing, and without any knowledge of English. So you can imagine, and they don't have lawyers except these volunteers that go down. There are some lawyers, but they don't have money to hire lawyers, but there are some others that work on a pro bono basis and do that. I know several of them that do that. And so My Spanish is not good. I cannot help down there. So I decided to help up here. And what I started doing was something called standby guardianships. What is happening? One of the saddest things that is happening is when people are getting deported, they are just getting deported from their jobs, their schools, their homes. And many of them have children who are US citizens because they are not just deporting hardened criminals and hardened gang members and people who really don't deserve to be here. Those aren't the people they're going after. They're going after the easy pickings. They're going after Juan and Maria down the street. So what happens is they pick them up and there's nobody there to take care of their kids because their kids are US citizens. They take kids, put them in foster care. Anybody ever have any familiarity with the foster care system? It's bad enough for any kid, but it's really bad for these kids. As many of them do speak English, but if they're younger, they probably only speak Spanish. And so what happens is they get sent to foster care. When you're in foster care, your parents have to do things in order to get you back. And there's no exceptions for the fact that you're sitting in a prison in El Salvador, or we don't know where mom is. She got deported and we don't even know what city they sent her to in Mexico. We can't find her. And they don't make any exceptions for any of that. All they do is parents abandon them. That's it. That's what's the determination. They have not come to court and asked for their kids back, which they have to do in person, which they can't do. And so the kids eventually become available for adoption. And this is going to be my focus when I retire. I plan on finding those kids and reuniting them with their families. And there are thousands of them between Trump's first term and this term. In fact, there's probably a lot more. So in Illinois, though, there's a very provision in law that people don't know a lot about, and it's a standby guardianship. And it's just a form. You fill it out, and it basically designates who you want to be the guardian of your child if you can't take care of them. And it's actually good for a year. And you don't have to even go to court. So I have these people come in, they fill out these standby guardianships. We make them a ton of copies. We tell them to put them in the baby's diaper bag, put them in the kid's school bag. If there's older kids and they speak good English, I will sit down with them and explain to them what they have to say to the police and such. Show them this. Say, me and my sisters and brothers, we have guardianship set up. Here's our attorney. Here's our guardian, and hopefully, law enforcement, social services, DCFS, I don't have much hope for them though. They will do the right thing, get a hold of the guardian, and get these kids where they belong so that somebody they know and care about is taking care of them, and somebody who probably has ties to their parents. I've had a few cases where literally it was the neighbors stepped up because they didn't have anybody here. But most of the time, it's another Hispanic family or a relative or something that's been here and has citizenship in that. And that way, so I put this out that we would do this, and we would do this pro bono. We're up to about 300 that we've done so far. And when you see these families come into my office, or sometimes I go out to them, there was one lady, she was a grandma, and she had the kids, and she just said, why do they hate us? Why do they hate us? It's nothing but tears, confusion, and absolute terror over this. And all these people, they're decent people. They're not criminals. They're not. And don't believe this nonsense that because they came over the border without documentation that they're criminals, it's an ordinance violation. It's like running a stop sign. That's how serious of a crime that supposedly is. Now, before I did a lot of this stuff, I did a lot of criminal defense, and I still do. And I've represented some pretty horrible people. And there's plenty of criminals for them to go after. And it's funny, none of them have been deported. None of them. And I don't know why. I really think they're just going after the easy pickings. So what you have in the Immigration Service, you have three main sub-agencies in immigration. You have the United States Customs and Immigration Service, which does most of the paperwork, processes things. The Secretary of State, the State Department, is also involved a little bit in that. Their embassies and consulates also process some of those applications, and that's mostly family visas they're doing. And so the UCIS processes all the applications. And then there's Customs and Border Patrol. They're the people who examine you at ports of entry. CBP has a lot of power. You can walk up there with a passport proving you're a citizen, and CBP says you're not coming in, you're not coming in. Their word is final. Their word is final. So you get a guy in a bad mood, you got a problem. And they do it all the time. They turn people down with very legitimate visas or legitimate passports. And then there is my favorite police agency in the world. It's Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. It's a police agency. That's what it is. They have police powers. They have arrest powers. I don't think many of them are actually trained police officers, though. We've been asking for like their training manuals and stuff like that, and I haven't been able to get my hands on them yet. But what has happened is it has become a agency or a sub-agency full of enforcement officers that are very prejudiced, and they call themselves conservatives. I just call them jerks. And if you've seen these people in action, and I have, you would be amazed at how heartless and cruel they can be. Just to be heartless and cruel, not because it's required. They can do this a lot nicer. They don't even have to be nice. Just be cordial. You don't have to yank people around. You don't have to scare to death Wella. You don't have to scare to death these little kids. You don't have to come to workplaces and just fly through it, pulling out anybody who's brown or has a Z on their last name, because that's all they do. They don't have warrants almost 99% of the time. And a lot of people are starting to get wind of this fact. So if you ever want to help somebody who's getting picked up, and you have the nerve to get in the middle of it, I'm not saying I recommend it, but what you want to do is ask for the warrant. And you want to make sure that warrant is signed by an actual judge, because they use something called administrative warrants signed by a ICE officer or a agent of the little courts that immigration court agent, not signed by an actual judge. And because it's pretty hard, first of all, there's not enough immigration judges. So, and there's none right here. We don't even have an immigration judge office in this area. There used to be one in St. Louis. Now you have to go to Chicago, Kansas City, or Memphis to have hearings from this area. So you can imagine why there's not a lot of lawyers doing this here in this area, in the St. Louis metropolitan area. It's because you can't even begin to make enough money from these people to cover your time and expenses to represent them. And so I don't blame a lot of people for not doing it. And then there's also the thing that it puts a big old target on your back as a lawyer. I've had death threats. I've had a lot of nasty emails and a lot of nasty posts online about me. Apparently, it turns out I'm a traitor. I should be shot. I should be arrested and put in prison for the rest of my life because I'm a lawyer and I'm doing what the law allows me to do. So we've been doing these standby guardianships, and so we have a lot of people. We do take a lot of precautions these days. I was telling some people earlier that we used to put it on Facebook. Hey, we're going to have a workshop. You need a standby guardianship, not documented. Come here. We'll do it for free. And we'd have people lined up at my office. And one day my son walked in and he says, Mom, he says, there's like 6 black SUVs parked down the street and we scattered. We scattered. Now, we never did find out if they were ICE or not, but you don't have 6 black SUVs parked down the street in Fairmont City unless they're up to something. And so now we're a lot more careful. And I've also kind of been warned by some people who I actually do like and who like me in law enforcement to be careful. They're looking for somebody to make an example of. And I'm not showing off because I'm being brave or anything like that, but that's really bullshit that they would do that to a lawyer. But then again, look what they're doing to people. Look what they're doing to them. And so when somebody gets picked up, they get deported. Sometimes they get put right on a plane and just sent to their country of origin. Very rarely do they get to choose where they go in their country of origin. So I also kind of prepare people in case you do get deported. This is what you need to think about. Some people do have some access to some money and have funds available to them. So I tell them if they offer you get on a flight to go back to Mexico, take that and go. And no matter where you wind up in Mexico, just then contact your family. They'll get you home, wherever you want to go. But most of the time, what they're doing is these people actually already have an immigration case pending. So they're here and they're out on they're on a release. They call it parole, which is not the same as parole when you've committed a crime and gone to prison and you're released from prison. It's a different kind of parole. It's basically being out on bail, on bond. And a lot of people have ankle monitors on. They know where they're at. They know what they're doing. They're not a danger to anything. They just want to stay here. And some of them even get work permits, especially the asylum seekers. So now they're pulling little crazy things like they're revoking the work permits for no reason at all. And the lack of transparency and due process in this is absolutely mind-boggling. And it's really offensive to people who are in the law. And I will have lawyers just look at me and say, that can't be true. And it is true. It is true. Believe me on this. I have had people picked up by ICE. Wife will call me up screaming, crying. They just took my sons, adult sons, who actually have visas. Okay? One had a DUI years ago, finished it, did everything he was supposed to do. I actually represented him. Everything was fine. They're in their late 20s now. They came to get him and just grabbed up the brother while they were at it. So I always tell people, I said, they're grabbing one, walk away. Because they'll grab you too. If you look the least bit Hispanic or foreign, or you have an accent, those are all big red flags. And I'm terrified when my son's driving through the South because he looks a lot more Hispanic than I do. And I got a lot of Polish in me. And he's dark with dark brown eyes, and his name is Daniel Enrique Suarez. I'll never find him. They pick him up. And I mean, I joke about this, but it's the truth. Okay. They are taking people who are US citizens. And then they're pulling this kind of stuff. Law enforcement is helping them. So I get a call a couple of weeks ago, and it is a neighbor of a family that I did not know. She just saw my name somewhere, and the neighbor called me and said that the father had been pulled over for a traffic violation. And a St. Louis City police officer gave him a ticket And the ticket was for not having a light on his license plate. I saw that eye roll. That's what it was for. No white person would ever get that ticket unless they were mad at him for some reason. And on the ticket, it gave him an address. It was an actual ticket. It was a St. Louis City ticket. I've seen plenty of those. I recognized it. They gave him an address to go to and told him he had to be there at 9 o'clock the next morning for court. And the police officer said, if you don't show up, I'm coming with ICE to your house to get you. So you have to show up. Well, that doesn't sound right. And I've represented people in traffic court and stuff in the city of St. Louis. I said, that's not how that works. You don't even get a court date for weeks, and you get for something that minor, you'll get an opportunity to pay online and not even have to go to court. And this just isn't adding up. So they texted me a picture of the ticket. And I'm looking at it, and I said to myself, there's something about this address. That's not St. Louis traffic court. And then it hit me. That's St. Louis Office of Immigrations, the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Office. This city cop sent him to immigration's office to turn himself in, basically. It took me, a priest, the head of an agency that works with, Mexican immigrants, and my office assistant, who was really good at this, to convince this man not to go to court the next morning. He did not give him a legitimate ticket. There was no ticket. We verified that. There was no ticket in the system. And they just wanted him to turn in. And so the next day, I was sitting in my car waiting for immigration, this guy to show up with immigration to get him, because I really thought that's what was going to happen. Nobody ever came to get him. But they tried to trick him into going there and turning himself in. And he would have been taken into custody if he had shown up there. So what's happening is people today are getting picked up who have valid visas and may have some kind of little blip on their record. I think probably the most serious one I've ever seen is a DUI. They're really going after people who've had DUIs. And you know what? I hate people who drive drunk. I really do. I represent them, though, because I'll represent anybody. That's what I do as a lawyer. But damn it, they don't deserve this. That's done. They had their punishment. They paid their fines. They did everything they were supposed to do. And in fact, most of them, when it's just one DUI, you don't even have a conviction. You just have like court supervision. It's like a probation that kind of goes off your record to the public, but not to law enforcement. So I've seen them take people because they said they've missed an immigration appointment. And what happened, if the immigration, this has been a problem in immigration forever. Their record keeping is horrible. And it's very hard for me as a lawyer to even keep, when I was doing immigration, to even keep track of where I was supposed to send things, because you send this to that person and this to that person and this to this person. And they sometimes didn't have the right addresses, or you'd send in your change of address and they just didn't change it, So the USCIS is a very overworked agency. And it's a very uncaring agency. It's very hard to get through to them by phone. And this is what I find the most incredible thing. One of my clients or somebody calls me and says, so-and-so's just got picked up by ICE. Can you help him? He has a visa. Maybe I can help that person. Okay. You can't find them. Now, when somebody calls me up and says, oh, my son got arrested last night, I don't know where he's at. They don't know where he's at. I mean, and it's, I have to ask a bunch of questions. Okay, it sounds like he's in Madison County. Well, I'm talking to him. Oh, yep, there he is. And he was charged with this. And he's got court on this date. And this is this. And I can tell him everything, usually within 12 hours. I can't do that with immigration cases. The only person who can look anything up on the computer is that person's actual lawyer. And even then, you don't get to see the whole case. So there's very little transparency. They say public is allowed into the courtrooms. That's not true. They will not let them in. Unless there's press there watching, then they'll let one or two in. There's no list of cases, our dockets, our people who are in front of the court. You don't know. You can't find their court dates. You can do a Freedom of Information request, but you won't get the answer for 6 months, and you need it 6 hours ago. So it's very, very difficult. So I've gotten to the point where, unless there's something special about it, I won't. I just say, I'm sorry, I can't help. And I refer them to some people who might take it, that I know and trust. But right now, I'm just really trying to help people get these standby guardianships done to protect the children. And then I also do a lot of I represent a lot of people who are not documented. And I have a little tricks in that to keep them out of the court system, because what's happening, even in the state of Illinois, they go to court, and Illinois is a sanctuary state, which means that local police are not supposed to cooperate with immigration enforcement, with federal immigration enforcement. So, but and because there's a lot of transparency in our system, what happens is ICE has learned all the little tricks. They'll go through the dockets for the day, which if you know how to do it, you can get it online. I can show any of you how to do that, how to find out who's showing up in court in St. Clair County tomorrow, even in Monroe County, and that's the way it should be. It should be transparent. And but ICE also takes advantage of that, and they'll be waiting down the block, waiting for them to go in, to go out. Now that's when they're just looking for a specific person, okay? And then we also have the people who work at the courthouses. Those are the people you really got to be scared of. A lot of people don't like immigrants, and I don't know why. Do you want to pick blueberries for $11 an hour, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week? The immigrants do. They're perfectly happy doing that. No, I'm going to say they're happy, but they accept that, and they work at that, and then they make something of themselves. And I can tell you story after story after story of families that I know that have done that. We represented a family in a wrongful death. Their father was killed in an industrial accident. Mom and dad were both citizens. All the children were citizens. But they were very, very, they all spoke Spanish, including the kids. The grandparents came here not documented. The parents were able to come here and get, I don't know how they did it, but they were able to get, I think there was a brother in Chicago who brought him in on a family visa, wound up with this whole family. And this man worked in warehouses and in hard industries, and he was killed in an industrial accident. His wife was a stay-at-home mom who was scared to leave the house because she's not documented. And this was even before Trump. And then she finally did get a green card. And their oldest daughter is a chemistry teacher. She was going to be a doctor, but she really wanted to be more, she's very, very religious and wanted to be a mom and a housewife. And she actually did, though, become a chemistry. She's a chemistry teacher at a local high school. The second daughter is a dentist. The third child, who's a son, is an engineer for McCarthy Brothers. The fourth daughter, the youngest, just started medical school. And they all came here. Their family came here just one generation before without documentation. Now, that is not an exception. There's a lot of families like that. Instead, they want to talk about the families that are, I don't know, living in crappy neighborhoods, and, maybe they get a little drunk and they roast goats in their backyards. That happens, yes. I was taking a friend of mine through Fairmont one day who was going to volunteer for me, a lawyer. And we go by this house and there's 3 goats out there. And he says, wow, they let livestock here? And I said, don't worry, they won't be here long. They'll probably be gone this weekend. And he went, oh. I said, it's really good too. But, Fairmont's a great little town. If you've ever had a chance to go there, there's some great restaurants there, including my family's restaurant, Coke's Tavern. And there's great Mexican restaurants. And everybody's hardworking. The houses are well kept. There's a lot of pride and ownership. And it is 85% Hispanic. And it's a great little town, great little town. But they're terrified. We almost canceled the parish's only fundraiser, their big, huge parish picnic, because we were so afraid of ICE coming in and raiding it, especially on Saturday night when we have the Mexican bands playing. So that was a big decision we had to make, and it was hard for me because I was the chair of the picnic, but I really was concerned about the safety of the people coming. And I wasn't just concerned about the people who were undocumented. I was concerned about everybody, because you just don't know what's going to happen. They're picking up people who are documented. They're picking up people with green cards and revoking them and deporting them. And so what's happening here is that there's a lot of laws being broken. Due process is not happening. Children are routinely separated from their parents. And people are being deported that don't even speak the native language because they've been here so long. I had one guy deported who came here as a 6-month-old. And he had no idea he wasn't a citizen until he got deported. His parents just didn't tell him. And he probably would have made it all the way through life. Oh, and he's an Army veteran. They never even figured it out when he joined the Army. So it's sad. It's beyond sad. And just a few days ago, there was an announcement that the administration is going to do something that is so scary, so beyond our rights in the United States, but he is going to ask the Supreme Court to suspend the ban on racial and ethnic profiling in order to carry out his deportation mission. I don't see any people with really dark hair here, but if you got them in your family, tell them to be careful. We're very quickly moving to a Nazi state where we're going to have to show our papers on a routine basis. Very much so. And you really and it's getting really scary. People are trying to interfere and they're getting arrested. If you know anybody that happens to, call me. I'll represent them for free. But that's what's going on right now. I hope I kind of gave you a good overview. And what can you do to help? Just support your friends and neighbors and try to convince other people, maybe tell them some of these truths, and then maybe that will help. So do any of you have any questions or anything? Without the immigrants that routinely come to Fairmont City and their families, the subsequent generations, Fairmont City wouldn't exist. It would just be another little poor town who didn't have anything. And it's a great little town. It really is. It's a good place to live. No crime, no, nothing. So. Repeat it? Sure. Anybody else? She wants to know what's happening with birthright citizenship. He's working on ending it. But I think what happened is I think somebody in his administration must have told him that's a can of worms that he doesn't want to open, but he's still saying he's going to do it. I'm not aware of any lawsuits that have been filed or anything by the administration, but it's still on the radar for him to do that. And that's going to be a constitutional crisis if that happens. So yeah, yeah, that's right. Another thing, this commenter brought up the fact that ICE agents are hiding their identities, not for their safety. Nobody's going to hurt them. Well, maybe some nut will, but all cops have to deal with that. They really do. It's part of the job. But they're hiding their identity because so many of them are people that may have had past criminal records, might have even been in January 6th. There are cases where that's happened. But another thing, and it reminded me, if you go to court with one of these asylum seekers or somebody with a visa or just a routine thing, the prosecutors, immigration prosecutors, do not have to give their name. It is not put on the record. You have no way of knowing who the lawyer is unless you know who they are personally. They don't give their names either. So, mhm. She wanted to know what is causing some people to be sent to alligator Alcatraz as opposed to other countries. We don't know. We really don't. We don't. We don't know. When you get picked up, you can get put on a plane within 12 hours and sent to your home country. You could be released. Very rare, but sometimes they just do release them. You can get sent to custody, and the federal government uses state and county jails. And there's just not enough of those. So they built these detention centers. So they're sending them there. And I don't know what makes them go. I don't know what the criteria is to say, well, you're going to go in with the alligators. And I would imagine maybe it would be maybe there are some violent criminals that they've gotten. I don't know. I just think the point is the meanness and the cruelty of it. I really do. Mm-hmm. So, anybody else? They can still come to the state. Law enforcement cannot help them. That if that is a county law, it wouldn't supersede state law. It wouldn't. It wouldn't. But somebody's got to challenge it, and that's what they're counting on, that they can get away with it until somebody challenges it. Right. Yeah. So it's just basically like if that's a whole thing about choice of law that's very complicated, but some cities and some counties and that are passing their own laws saying, yeah, we're going to help them, we're going to do that. And I don't think they can, but the problem is they will until somebody files it and challenges it. And hopefully, and even when you go to county court, they're gonna lose because a lot of these counties are very conservative. They're judges, they're prosecutors, everybody. So you get a conservative judge, you got to keep appealing it until you get into the courts with more sense and more liberal judges who aren't political. So even though we are a sanctuary city, it really doesn't mean that much. They can come here. They can do what they want. They do not go into most courthouses. They do not go in, St. Clair County will not let them in their courthouse. Madison, they say they don't, but I've heard they've been in there. Um, I would imagine Monroe lets them in. I don't know. But like Clinton, and you realize that there are a lot of farm workers out in the rural areas, so and a lot of those come with the agricultural visa. And so they may overstay that when that is up. That's another type of visa they can come on that their employers have to get, which is just a temporary worker visa. They come and they go. They come and they go. But that's very hard on those workers, and that whole system needs to be revised too. We need a major, major overhaul of our immigration laws. And there's so many ways they can be improved, and we can streamline this and we can control it. But quite frankly, America needs their immigrants. They really do. And the whole state of Nebraska, those farmers up there are just besides themselves because they can't find anybody to work. That's right. We're in what are we in that? The FAFO stage, the F around and find out stage now. So, but unfortunately, a lot of really good people are being hurt, and a lot of innocent people are being hurt. Families are being torn apart, and he is not doing what he said he was going to do. He was only going to get rid of the criminals. He was only going to get rid of this. He's not. He's just picking up everyday immigrants who've been living their lives without any problems, putting money into the system. I do know one. I represented him briefly. He owned a chain of Mexican restaurants. I call it a chain. There were 4 or 5 of them across Southern Illinois, and he got a DUI. And when he went to jail for the DUI, they found out he wasn't documented. And the next thing you know, they were raiding it just ballooned, and all of his restaurants are closed now. So there you employees lose their jobs, and municipalities lose their tax bases. He has had those restaurants for over 20 years. His family has lost everything, and he's been deported. So, well, we just have to stand tall. You, you know what? There is a couple of agencies over in St. Louis, and one of them is called the MICA Project, MICA, and they do really good work. And if anybody wants to give money to them to help immigrants, because that's all it's an agency, it's a law firm basically. And that's all they do is represent immigrants and try to help them not get deported and such. And they can always use money. So it's in the city of St. Louis, and I don't have their contact. It's MICA is the name of the agency. So, and I could probably find some others that I can maybe send to you and let you know about that you can publicize. But there's not even a lot of that because there's a lack of lawyers and lack of lawyers who speak Spanish. Well, you have to have an undergrad degree. You can have an undergrad degree in anything. I had an undergrad degree in genetic engineering, and I got admitted to law school. And you have to have a pretty decent record. And then it's a pretty extensive application process. You have to take the law school admissions test known as the LSAT. You cannot get into any law school without taking that test. And that pretty much, it's worth your while to prepare for that exam because it determines whether you're going to get in law school or not. You can have a great, great resume, and if you blow that test, you're not going to get in. And so then it's a 3-year program. And after that, they turn you loose on the world and let you be a lawyer if you pass the bar exam. So, so any other questions or? Well, that's another thing. Lack of transparency. We can't get those statistics, but just anecdotally, thousands, thousands, easily. And up in the Chicagoland area, tens of thousands, if not more, if not hundreds of thousands. Illinois is a big state for immigrants. Um, God bless Pritzker. No matter what you think of him, he's doing his best with this. He really is. And it's a problem that is not going to go away. And we do have to overhaul this system and make it better and figure this out. And in the meantime, all we can do is just support our neighbors. I tell people if somebody comes knocking on your door and you don't know them, just don't answer the door. Don't answer the door. And if you're really worried, call me and I'll see what I can do. I could take your name, and I've actually my sister and two school teachers have told me they would take kids in that circumstance, and my sister's also a school teacher, and unless I know you personally though, or you're in a profession like a teacher that I know you have been vetted and stuff, I probably wouldn't give your name out, just be on the safe side. You know what I mean? But yeah, there are a lot of people, like some people, lady came in and she had the first name of the woman and I said, well, how do you know this woman? It's her boss. Her boss agreed to do it. I actually called that woman and made sure it was okay. And then what I also do is I agree to, if the kids do get taken into foster care, because that can happen, DCFS and police officers don't always do the right things. Mostly DCFS doesn't do the right things. And I will go to court for that child, but somebody's got to let me know it's happening because I don't know. I have no way of knowing. So I always, part of my instructions is you tell this guardian and you tell your neighbors and you tell this person, you tell everybody you know to call me if you get deported. Once I know, then I can help. But a lot of times I don't. So far, I've had, I think, 3 people that have been deported and their kids went where they were supposed to go with no problem. So, and we can actually renew that after a year if the family has not been able to reunite with the kids somehow. But in fact, I can renew it year by year by year, or I can go to court at the end of the year and get an actual guardianship, a full-on guardianship. And I'll do all that for free. So, anything else? It's just not. I don't know if anybody, when they were, I think it was in Biden's administration, they were trying to do it and the Senate held it up and didn't let it go through. And that wasn't actually a major overhaul, but there were some improvements in it. This thing just needs to be just destroyed and written over, this whole set of laws. It really does. If you don't think there are second-class citizens in this country, you haven't met an immigrant. That's right. That's right. And so what's happening too is that I was on a radio show not too long ago that is oriented to the Black community, and they wanted me to speak on that, is how this immigration enforcement is actually kind of tearing apart the Black and Hispanic communities, and they need to come together and help each other. And so we talked about that a little bit because that's a long, complicated scenario, but that is an issue. That really is an issue. But we've all been sitting around with our heads in the sand, pretending stuff like this doesn't happen. And I'm here to tell you, if you get anything from this speech, that there are abuses of basic human rights going on in this country that are pervasive, and a lot of them And we are not able to do anything about it because of what this administration has put in place. So, can I help you? You really have to be careful. Okay. Sometimes I tell people you just have to go in it expecting to get arrested, but don't push on them. Don't push on ICE physically, because then that's I'm not going to be able to get rid of that. That's an assault on a police officer, on a law enforcement officer, on a federal law enforcement officer. It's even worse. But you might get charged with a felony on assisting and abating an undocumented immigrant, which is a serious felony. I think I can get rid of that too. But I just tell people, can I see that, you just ask, basically it's kind of a shaming thing more than anything. Make it hard for them. I saw a group of people get in between the officers and the immigrants and just link arms, and they didn't say a word. They wouldn't look at them. They didn't do anything. And the ICE people left. This was in California. So, I mean, I have to tell you, I just think the most important thing to do is document it, take pictures, and let somebody like me know what went down. They, no, no, not really. If they say they're an ICE officer, you're supposed to believe them. Some people have been asking and they've just been showing them a badge. I'm going to tell you, I don't think everybody out there is an ICE officer. I really don't. We're going to start hearing some stories about that soon. They're not training them very well, these new ones. So they aren't really doing things right. Now they're taking, I just saw this on the news. They raided a Mexican restaurant in Iowa, I think it was. And later on, people took video of the ICE agents carrying out inventory and putting them in their personal cars. But how do you identify them? But they did get some license plates and stuff like that. So there might be something might happen there. Yeah, they might get arrested. Might. So I don't know how long you guys want to stay. I'm willing to take some more questions if you want to. Um, yeah, it is. I I also tell people, if you see somebody getting taken over, getting picked up by ICE, and if you don't have a language problem, a language barrier, ask them, who can I call for you? Because they don't let them make phone calls. They really don't. Now every once in a while you'll get somebody who makes a phone call, but usually I have found that it's those people who have been here a long time and they're so Americanized, they're gonna raise hell in that detention center until they get their phone call. But like, who can I call for you? Just so you can let their family know they've just been picked up. There's Google Translate too. It works very well, but you may not be able to get an opportunity to use that in this kind of situation. You might be across the thing saying, who can I call? Give me a number, nombre, and they'll yell out a number for you and then call them, or something like that. Wouldn't hurt to learn a few phrases in Spanish. And I'm not saying this is only Spanish speakers who get picked up, but around here it is. It's pretty much just Spanish speakers. And but do you know who the largest number of undocumented immigrants are in Chicago? Undocumented Polish maids. They come here, a family will hire them to come over and work for a couple of years on a temporary work visa of some kind, and they just overstay their visa. Or they'll come here on a tourist visa and they just overstay their visa. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. And so, there are a lot of people who are here who Melania Trump is an absolute perfect example of that. She came here on a tourist visa or a student visa. She overstayed it, and she worked. She did commit crimes by doing that, working, overstaying the visa, and then working. That is a more serious crime. She did that. It's documented. But if you FOIA her immigration records, because that's the only way you're going to see them, you get denied. Because believe me, we've all tried. Yes. Um, so he wanted to know, this is a really good question. People who've overstayed their visa, are they trying to renew them? They would like to, but they can't. There's no way. Yeah, there's no way. Do not bring attention to yourself by trying to get another visa. And you'd be amazed at, I've had people like leave the country, and this was before this all started, leave the country, then come back on a fiance visa. And then they're going to try to get, their green card. And ICE will look into it and find out, have they been here? Were they here undocumented before? And they will find things such as bank accounts, pictures, Facebook posts, and they find that stuff. So unless you are just as clean as could be, don't even try that. You're going to be found. But the main baseline question I ask when people are worried about something like this, I say, have you ever been fingerprinted by ICE? And if they say no, they've got a pretty good chance of staying under the radar. But if they have been, they're kind of screwed. They're not going to be able to apply for a new visa or anything like that. And once you get deported, you're done. You'll never get one. So, can I? No, the companies want to sponsor them, but remember I told you there's only 140,000 of those spots, and they just don't exist. So unless you're graduating from MIT with a doctorate in nuclear physics, you're going to have a hard time finding that. Right. That's exactly right. So, yes. He's probably buddied up with some of the Homeland Security people and the ICE agents. Um, St. Louis City is notorious for dirty cops. I'm not kidding. It's bad there. It really is. And so they are, there's a camaraderie among these. I find that the bad guys tend to gravitate toward other bad guys, and they're probably just buddies, or he's just got a personal thing. Get rid of this illegal. And I try really hard not to use that term illegal because I just think it's so demeaning. It's undocumented person or undocumented immigrant. That's what I use. And so that's the first question I ask anybody who comes into my office. I don't care if you're lily white. I ask you, are you a citizen of the United States? And if you aren't, what is your immigration status? I have to know that before I do anything. And you would not believe how many people do not get legal help because they think they don't have a right to it because they're not documented. They can sue, they can be sued, they can be arrested, they can get orders of protection. But right now, I tell any undocumented person not to go anywhere near a courthouse if you don't have to. I really do. I'm hoping to get some over there, but that's probably one of the few things that are going through our spouse and fiance visas. It's going to take a long time, and he probably needs a really good immigration lawyer. There's a couple over in St. Louis that if you want to be nice and tell them the names, I can give them to you. But it's got to be done absolutely right. She's got to make some applications at the U.S. Embassy and stuff. But I mean, I think she might be able to get here. It may take a year or two. Yeah. Yeah. So, and also Brazil also has some issues. Yeah, so that might complicate it. Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela, they're not being real receptive to people from those countries. So the only thing I've been doing in that, and what she wanted to know, is there any agency that you can make donations to or to help people who take in these American children as guardians? There's two agencies in Fairmont. One is called Sin Fronteras, which is out without borders. And I cannot think of the name of the other one. And they work with a lot of people like this, and I work with them informally. And I'll have to get you the name of the other one. I cannot think of the name of the other one right now. But Without Borders, and then there's another one, and they do work with a lot of immigrant families. And I kind of do like, I had a guy come in one time and he said he had $1,000 he wanted to help somebody out with. And I just called one of those agencies and I said, who needs this money? And he wanted to make a difference in a family. So that's why he wanted to give it to one family. And they talked him into giving it to 500 to two different families. But they were able to put people together like that. I don't have a lot of time to do that, but I can direct you. Sin Fronteras. SIN, new word, FRONTERAS. It means without borders. Okay, and they're in Fairmont City. You can call them. They're actually an extension of a big agency. And I can't remember the name of that either, but they're very legitimate. And I know everybody who works there. No, you might. No, I'm not gonna say it, but I'm like, donate money to that. You might be buying Christmas gifts for their kids. I'm not kidding. It's pretty rotten out there. Pretty is. So, anything else? All right. I didn't make anybody cry though. my last two speeches, people were crying when I got done. All right. Thanks for inviting me. I do appreciate the chance to kind of set some things straight and educate people about this stuff so that they can go out there and fight on their own. And if you have any questions, I've got some cards. You can take them and feel free to call. I'm sorry. I'm Marleen Menendez Suarez. I'm going to leave some of my cards out. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.